Hey there, hunters, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild. I know we just got out of the emergency room with that last update, and we're still trying to figure out what builds are good, what builds are going to be staying good, and what builds died in the ER. Today, I want to talk briefly about two of my previous builds that are kind of surviving in this new patch. But first, really quick, I want to talk about the DLC in the patch and what kind of got killed with our setups and such. And I'm not exaggerating at all, some of our previous builds did just get killed and are no longer usable. Like, we just can't do it. So first thing is Devoured Loop. In the patch notes, it had stated that it no longer regens all skill charges when it procs, which is fair, but now it doesn't refresh active skills when it does proc. So you can't bank charges on anything useful anymore. You can't even proc the effect while both your skills are active right now, so it just doesn't do anything. With that change, basically all the loop builds are kind of dead. Both Havoc Loop and Skill Loop, which I had previously done, are both dead, which sucks because I actually really wanted to reintroduce those two for this patch because Havoc forms a lot better. And this does also include some things like Sapphire Dreamstone, which won't cool down active skills as well. Now, the other thing that got killed is Mod Swapper. There's just not enough mod power to go around to let us use the old Helix and Dead Point setup for more than a few switches. Like, you can literally use every mod cost and mod power generating thing in the game, and it's just not enough. There are still a few mod power builds that can function very well, and I'll get to those eventually, but Mod Swapper is just gone. So I won't be building around those anymore unless something radical changes. Also, I don't want to do a lot of videos right now to especially new builds and stuff, because like every patch we have a lot of stuff that's just broken, as in too strong and will be nerfed, or some things that are broken because they actually don't work properly. And then we have some things that are appearing to be fine right now, but we don't know if they're going to stay that way. So there's supposed to be a hotfix to address a lot of these issues, but me sounding like a broken record here, I have no idea what else will be broken in the process. We don't know when the patch is, so I have to kind of wait on making builds. So I'm going to start by playing it safe here. As I mentioned, I'm going to showcase two of my previous builds and just update those. And that's going to be the Shotgun Swapper and the HUGS, as you can tell by the title. So I'm going to start with HUGS, and I'm using HUGS Bow here. Pretty much as I expected from my previous video where I was testing the damage pre-patch, we basically lost 30% of our damage trimmed off the top on all HUGS builds. You can still sit around 5k DPS in bursts, and you're going to sustain about 4k over 300,000 damage or something like that. Anyone doing more is either using Hunter's Focus, which is bugged and granting 100% crit chance instead of 0, or using other broken exploited things like Bulletstorm and lever action weapons or something like that. This setup still feels pretty good, to be honest. HUGS is still great. It's awesome to clear areas because I always use Hunter's Mark, which is great because you can just see everything easily. Even on bosses, the damage is still solid. 5k DPS is solid damage for bosses that have weak spots available, and bosses that don't kind of suck, but you get over it, right? Because also HUGS just doesn't have a whole lot of moving parts. It's just kind of comfy to play, despite, the loss of a lot of our damage. Anyway, we're looking at the good old Crescent Moon bow here with this HUGS setup, though really any bow works well these days. Royal Hunting Bow got buffed. It is insanely good with MO mods now, and Sagittarius always hit like a truck, but at least now the mod is usable. Honestly, they all average pretty similar DPS in the long run when you factor mod activation times and such. I'm going with Crescent Moon though, and as you can see, we can average about 5k DPS until we have to wait for skill cooldowns and to readjust from Bulletstorm. The neat thing about Crescent Moon now though is that we can have a 100% charge time reduction for now. I won't promise that's staying. So right now, all we have to do is tap to get perfect shots, and you can achieve this by using Bulletstorm as well as the Archer's Crest ring and the new Feathery Binding ring, and then you also have to pair that with a Supercharged Mutator. And so when we have Crescent Moon's mod active, it's really easy to just tap and get the double shots, which is just a ton of damage still. Now, to make sure we have the haste to get the double effects for the Feathery Binding ring, I'm going to be using Nightweaver's Grudge and the Atonement Fold ring. While this is slightly less DPS than running something like Anastasia's ring and then the Whetstone, you're trading 5% crit chance for 15% crit damage, plus now you also have to maintain bleeds. Your call. But those are the two ways you can easily keep up the haste for the Feathery Band. The last ring slot here, we're going to be using the Leaking Gemstone. This allows us to continually generate mod power through active mods, which for Crescent Moon basically lets you have the mod up almost 100% of the time. Maybe you need one or two more shots to refresh the mod once it goes off cooldown if you didn't land enough double hits or something, or a Bulletstorm fell off, whatever. But it's going to be really close. This also lets us maintain the mod for our handgun as well. Now, speaking of our handguns, first let's take a quick glance at Crescent Moon. Nothing surprising here. We're using Supercharger. It's just the best mutator for bows. Our melee weapon does nothing for us. Don't worry about it. Use whatever you want. And for the handgun, I'm going to go with Nebula because it's great for trash clear and corrosion adds a little bit of extra damage. Plus, with the leaking gemstone, we always have that mod available to us when we need it, so you can just fire and forget it and go back to shooting your bow. For the relic, I'm using Tranquil Heart for the Atonement Fold, so it just kind of mitigates that. But you can also use Profane Heart for 3% leech if you're going to be using like the Whetstone setup. For the relic fragments, these are standard crit damage, and weak spot damage for the bows. Now, minor note for the skills, of course we have to use Bulletstorm for the charge time reduction on bows, but also Hunter's Mark is just my personal pick. You can use Hunter's Focus or Hunter Snipers, or whatever the other third skill is. I'm just not doing that right now because Hunter's Focus is bugged and granting 100% crit chance. For our traits, I'm going to be using Swiftness and Untouchable because of course I play Glass Cannon builds. I also picked up Gifted and Chakra for mod and skill duration, which definitely helps since we're going to be using mods and skills all the time. The rest, kind of up to you. I went with Vigor and Endurance as well as Expertise. And my last points I split between Strong Back and Spirit just because I wanted to get medium rolls on Crimson Armor. I typically just run light, but I really like this armor now. But more Spirit's better for the Crescent Moon, so I'd go with that. So all in all, the only nerfs that HUGS really got was just all its damage. It still performs the same. It's still really good, especially by build standards nowadays where everything took a big hit. Unfortunately though, crit stacking is still the way to go since additive damage is just not all that helpful. I really like the play with stacking charge time with the 2 charge rings, and that's like indirect DPS increases, which I think is always fun to play with. And leaking gemstone definitely makes the mod generation for non-mod builds much less of an issue. And that's worth the loss of like a crit or DPS ring. And I think things like that are what I feel like we need more of. Not direct damage trinkets, which unfortunately most of them are. But yeah, HUGS is still great. I've mentioned many times before, but you can run HUGS with pretty much any weapon. Right now, you can also use Savior if you wanted to instead of Bow, at least with this charge setup since it does sit around 5k DPS as well. But with a change to its damage, non-perfect shots deal like nothing, so once Bulletstorm falls off, adjusting to that can be kind of tricky and lose you a ton of damage, but Savior is still great. You can also still run the old crit setups with Monarch or Corrupted Savior, but I do know that they're only going to be doing about 3.5 to 4k DPS, not 6k like they used to. It's still decent for how safe they are to play, and just needing to push one button is nice, though we're far from melting bosses at this point. But anyway, that's HUGS, it's limping along, it still works. I'm going back to using bows. Moving on, I want to talk to you about Shotgun Swapper. While this build also stacked the same crit and crit damage as HUGS like every other build did, the main differences before was that we used Provisioner's Ring to fill our ammo so we didn't have to reload. And with that, we wanted to use more Emerald Reserve items to increase Provisioner Ring's reload speed. So effectively, increasing our DPS through more uptime and less reload time. Well, now with all the changes to crit and crit damage, we lost a lot of our burstiness. With that comes problems, because it means we have to sustain our swapping for even longer because boss fights are longer, which means that we're going to run out of ammo more often and break our flow, and it's just kind of a mess. Now, despite Provisioner's Ring getting buffed, we actually don't see that much more ammo regen from it. Definitely not to sustain the mod swapper for as long as we need to now, but we do have another trick up our sleeves. Since the patch confirmed the functionality of Transpose, we will now be able to use the level 10 on that, which says that new ammo gains are added directly to the magazine, to be able to use that with Refunder in our sidearm. So 25% of the shots from our sidearm will now also refund ammo to our primary weapon, our shotgun. So this is a great set of mutators, because not only is it going to help us sustain our loop, but we don't really have any good options for mutators for Shotgun Swapper style. Most of them fall off when you swap your weapons. But with these mutators, and Provisioner's Rings boost, we can actually sustain our swapper loop indefinitely as long as our ammo holds out if we use the Deep Pockets ring and the ammo reserve fragment and the ammo reserve trait. But in reality, we don't need all that. Transpose and Refunder are so good that we can actually take off the relic fragment and put either swap speed or weak spot damage for more damage, and then save us a ring slot from the Deep Pockets ring and get like, Braided Thorns for 10% more crit. So it's going to be really close, and you can technically still fall off your cycle there, but you get a lot more damage out of it. That's basically how we're sustaining Shotgun Swapper these days. Of course, we also need to talk about the Onyx Pendulum, which is our new go-to neck for shotgun swapping. Basically, they introduced this as a new 20% multiplicative damage, which is good, not crazy overpowered, but good. Really, it's about as comparable as the current Abrasive Whetstone if you're doing more crit stuff at least. Overall, it's better in my opinion since we don't have to maintain bleeds anymore, nor do we have to rely on crits since we aren't getting 100% crit on these setups. Anyway, good neck. So here's where the Shotgun Swapper build gets a little bit interesting. Typically, when I do Shotgun Swapper, I do Hunter Challenger, because really you don't get much out of Gunslinger in the Shotgun Swapper setup. None of the traits or skills from Gunslinger do much since we don't really reload or need fire rate. But this time, I set up my Shotgun Swapper to be Archon and Hunter. Yeah, bet you haven't seen that mix before. So the reason being is that when you apply MO mods to your weapon, they gain the mod tag. So that lets them scale with both ranged and mod damage simultaneously. So Archon's actually going to give us 50% damage while we have the mods active. And slightly more importantly, we get 10% mod crit, which is applied to our guns as well. Since Challenger lost its 10% crit, this was an alternative way to getting that back, which is pretty petty for 5% crit, right? Now Archon of course still has useful skills with the Bubble and Chaos Gate. While I personally don't like either of these skills very much, they are a bit more usable than anything Gunslinger brings, and I don't like Challenger's Berserk activation, so that's just me. So because of this, I need to sustain these MO mods to keep them up indefinitely so I can keep my damage and crit up. So I put on the Leaking Gemstone ring because this ring will let us pretty much keep our MO mods up all the time. Like, it's not 100%, but we can regen a lot of the mod power while they're active. So as you can see here, my trinkets are the Pendulum, the Leaking Gemstone, the Provisioner's Ring, and then your last 2 slots are up to you. Braided Thorns, Akari Warband, Xania's Malice, Ring of Flawed Beauty, and Burden of the Gambler are all good choices depending on your target and whether or not you have access to weak spots. For my weapons, I'm using Rupture Cannon over Magnum right now because the extended clip and reserves allows me to not worry about it, as it will always be topped off from Provisioners, and the Rough Thunder will go into the shotgun to sustain that significantly more. With Magnum and its smaller clip and reserve sizes, you can technically run out of ammo occasionally, unless I use Deep Pocket Rings and Ammo Fragment, and I feel like the damage is slightly better using Rupture Cannon with a 15% weak spot damage fragment and 10% more crit chance from like Braided Thorns. For my skills, I'm using Chaos Gate occasionally, but it's not that big of a deal. Archon I am actually keeping in the Prime slot. I do need the mod generation to help feed my MO mod sustain, and as much as I would love to run Hunter Primary, I just can't manage the mods without Archon Prime still. I'm using a Hunter's Mark as my Hunter skill, but I'm most likely going to swap that to Focus once the crit has been nerfed. At that point, I may actually swap Hunter to Prime and find another way to sustain my mods, because then I can keep Hunter's Focus up for the whole time. But yeah, we'll cross that bridge whenever that gets fixed. Now for my traits, I'm running Swiftness and Untouchable of course. Footwork and Handling is nice because we're in ADS most of the time and we have shotgun spreads to reduce, so we need handling. Ammo Reserves is mandatory, and I dump the rest into Spirit for mod generation. Chakra, probably fine too if you want to go that route to get like 6 more seconds on your MO mods, but I figured I'm gonna have to be recharging them anyways, might as well just get more mod generation. So with this weird setup for Shotgun Swapper, we can push over 5k DPS in our burst window, and we're gonna drop to around 4.4k through multiple clips and skill cycles. It's pretty solid damage for what we have right now. It's far from, its 6.5k former glory, like it was really good before. It feels fine for bossing, to be honest, and the map clear isn't much of an issue since we do pretty much have our mods active all the time and we never have to reload. I have tried a few other mod swapper setups like the traditional Hunter Challenger or Hunter Handler, and they're fine, but they end up falling off with their damage since they can't sustain their mods or skills for too long. So this was the only way I could actually squeeze out a little bit extra damage. Okay, that was a lot longer than I anticipated. So we have a lot of changes here in Remnant 2, and we're all still just waiting for this dust to settle before making any declarations and such. Anyone that's making like tier lists is just blowing smoke out their ass at this point. There's going to be another fairly large hotfix patch soon, so let's wait and see what happens then. In the meantime though, I don't think these two builds are going to be getting any worse. They should only improve from this point. And right now, I'll take 4 to 5k DPS. It seems solid enough, and I don't think we're going to get much better over extended periods. So anyway, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Stay tuned for more build videos of me talking shit about everything that changed because I'm bitter and all my builds got nerfed. But yeah, peace and good luck out there, hunters.